How's it going, everyone? This is Adam from Slurv, Ship My Money on DraftKings, and I'll be breaking down today's pitching slate for you for May 12th. As usual, I'm going to start out with my cash options on both FanDuel and DraftKings, and then I'll move into my GPP pitchers, guys that I think are either a little bit riskier or just good differentiation off of what I expect the chalk pitching to be. And then I'll finish up with the stacks that I want to use, what pitchers I want to target. So starting with my cash options, Clayton Kershaw is just number one on both sites, 13,300 on DraftKings, 12,500 on FanDuel. His matchup doesn't really matter because he's such a good pitcher, but he gets a pretty good matchup today with the Mets on top of, just being really good. Against lefties dating back to last year, the Mets strike out about 24% of the time, and Kershaw is just absolutely dominant against lefties. He strikes out about 39% of lefties he faces. So it's just a really nice matchup for him on top of everything that he has going for him anyway. Moving down a little bit, on DraftKings, I like Vincent Velasquez at 10,900 as a cash option, actually more than a GPP option today, and I'll get into that later. But I think he's in play as a cash option on both sites. He's 9,100 on FanDuel. He's facing a Braves team who really has struggled to hit right-handed pitching so far this year. They have a 65 WRC plus, strike out about 19.5% of the time. So, not a huge strikeout team, but they just don't hit. So I think he's a safe option. I think Jimmy Nelson's in play on both sites. He's 9,200 on DraftKings, 7,600 on FanDuel. I prefer him on FanDuel, obviously, at the much lower price. But with him, definitely check the Padres lineup before you just plug him in, because he's much, much better against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching. And lately, the Padres have been using a little bit more lefties with Jankowski and Wallace and Alex Dickerson up from the minors. So if they are using 3 or 4 lefties today, it definitely makes me like Jimmy Nelson less, especially on DraftKings where you get penalized for walks and hits allowed, and he's priced higher. So definitely at least look at the Padres lineup before you just see right-handed pitcher against the Padres and assume he's going to be a really good play today. On DraftKings only for cash, I like Nate Eovaldi at 7,700. I think he's priced too highly for cash on FanDuel at 8,900, but at 7,700, he's facing a Royals team who, people don't like to target the Royals, but they really just haven't been a good hitting team against right-handed pitching so far this year. They only have an 82 WRC plus. They don't strike out a lot, so I don't know that there's a ton of upside for Eovaldi, but his strikeout numbers are up this year, and I think that's due to him adding a split-fingered pitch that so far is graded out really well. So I think that's the reason that his swinging strike percentage is up, his strikeout rate is up, and I just think this is a pretty safe matchup against the Royals, and I really like him with that 7,700 price tag on DraftKings. You can pair him with Kershaw and still get some pretty good bats in your lineup. Moving into GPP options, Kershaw on both sites is in play. I just think he's got one of my favorite matchups today on top of being the best pitcher on the board. So, if you can fit him, he's just my number one option. On DraftKings, I'm not big on David Price. I'd rather wait and see him have a good start, but I would rather play him in GPPs than Velasquez on DraftKings because Price is 11,100, Velasquez is 10,900. I think Velasquez is going to just get a ton of ownership, and he, to me, is just like a little bit of a fraud so far this year as far as what people think his strikeout upside is and what it actually is or has been. If you look at his strikeout rate, it's really high. His swinging strike percentage is really high. But I just really don't like him in this matchup today for upside because the Braves, for one, don't strike out that much. They're only around like 19 or 20% against right-handed pitching. But if you break down their plate discipline numbers, they actually will swing and miss, but they just swing a lot. And so they just end up putting the ball in play before they strike out. And if you combine that, if you break down Velasquez's swinging strike numbers by game this season, against the Padres, he struck out 16 people, and his swinging strike percentage was like a ridiculous 23%. But outside of that game, he had a 10% swinging strike rate in his first start, and in the last 4 starts since the Padres game, it's been between like 7.5% and 8.5%, which is just really low. and you're facing a team that already doesn't strike out, I just don't see the upside for him at 10,900. Whereas Price against the Astros is a lot riskier, but he did make some changes to his mechanics, in his bullpen session this week, working on a higher leg kick that was pointed out that he used to have. He's facing an Astros team that they strike out less against left-handed pitching. It's only between 21 and 22%, but they still can strike out. And Price so far this year has struck out 29% of righties, the Astros being a right-handed heavy lineup. So despite his struggles, he's still been striking a lot of guys out. And, some of his peripherals do point to him getting better. He has his BABIP's over 400. It's 404. His xFIP against right-handed pitching is only 284. So you expect him to get better. The thing that stands out is his hard hit percentage against right-handed pitching is 43%. So, that's still just a huge red flag. But it's definitely possible that, they fix something in his mechanics and he's going to come out and have a good start. So if I'm just looking for, tournament upside, I'm going David Price as a pivot off of Velasquez today. Moving down the board a little bit. Oh, actually, staying on Velasquez for a second, sorry. On FanDuel, my pivot off of Velasquez is Eovaldi. I said I thought he was too expensive for cash games, but he's 8,900 on FanDuel, so he's priced 200 below Velasquez. And again, people in that price range are just going to flock to Velasquez. But if you look at the Braves and the Royals, hitting profiles as far as plate discipline goes, they're very similar teams. The Braves have worse hitters, but the Royals aren't good against right-handed pitching either. The Royals rank 10th or 12th in contact percentage this season. The Braves rank 10th. They're just very similar if you just go through all of their plate discipline stats, other than the Braves swing at more pitches out of the strike zone, but they make contact with more pitches out of the strike zone, or higher percentage pitches out of the strike zone, whereas the Royals swing it less and make contact with less. But Eovaldi kind of just lives in the strike zone anyway, so it's more if he has to swing and miss stuff, he'll get some extra strikeouts. But I'm not saying that I think Eovaldi has a ton of upside in this matchup, but I don't think Velasquez has as much as people think either. So if you're going to take a pitcher in that price range, I would rather just take Eovaldi at next to no ownership. And if he beats Velasquez, then you have a leg up on all the teams who, built similar stacks to you and then used Velasquez. Moving down a little bit, I think Nelson is in play in GPPs on both sites. Again, it depends who's in the lineup for the Padres, and I don't love him just because I think he's going to be more popular than he should be. He's priced higher on DraftKings, but I don't think that'll really matter since you need the second starting pitcher and people just flock to Padres pitchers. I mean, if you look at Kyle Hendricks yesterday, you have a guy who, for the last 2 weeks, everybody's been talking about how he has no upside, and then he's 50% owned in tournaments just because he's playing the Padres. So I think it'll be really high ownership on Nelson tonight as well. So that's why I'm going to try and find other routes in tournaments, but I do think he's in play. On FanDuel, Jimenez, I think, is a great pivot off of him. They're priced really similar. Jimenez, 7,300, Nelson, 7,600. And I think Jimenez is in play on DraftKings as well at 7,000. It's a scary matchup with the Tigers because, they can hit right-handed pitching. It's in Camden Yards. They have a lot of power bats. But Jimenez so far this year struck out about 22% of batters he's faced. Since he's been with the Orioles, he's generally been better when he's pitching at Camden Yards. And the thing that gets Jimenez in trouble, he doesn't have a really high swinging strike percentage, but he doesn't give up a lot of hard contact, and he gets strikeouts. The thing that gets him in trouble is when he's walking guys. But the Tigers against right-handed pitching this year have like a 6.8% walk rate, which is the 5th or 6th lowest walk rate in the major leagues. So I think this is a pretty good matchup for Jimenez. He's a ground ball pitcher, so being in Camden Yards isn't as scary, and facing those power bats isn't as scary. And he's facing the Tigers team who just strikes out a ton against right-handed pitching. They were at 24% going into yesterday, and then they struck out 20 times against Scherer, so that's even higher now. So I just think I think it's risky, and it's only a GPP play, but I think this matches up really well for Jimenez to possibly have a nice start as a salary relief option for you. So that's what I'm thinking in GPPs. As far as hitters, I expect the Orioles to be super chalk today going against Mike Pelfrey at home at Camden Yards. And I think they're good chalk. I mean, they're a team that can just absolutely blow up, especially on FanDuel. They're also underpriced. I will at least point out that Mike Pelfrey has a very high ground ball rate. So, if you're looking for a reason to fade the Orioles, you can kind of just look there and maybe they'll score like 6 runs off of him just from like singles then instead of, hitting 5 or 6 home runs. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but he does at least get more ground balls than fly balls. But other options that I'm interested in, I like the Yankees today against Ian Kennedy. Ian Kennedy does have reverse splits, and he's going to be facing a lot of lefties, but his xFIP against lefties is still like a 1.5, 2 runs higher than his ERA. He gives up a lot of hard contact against lefties, a lot of fly balls, and it's still in Yankee Stadium, so you're once again just talking about hard-hit fly balls. He's more of a strikeout pitcher than some of these other guys that have been facing the Yankees, but the Yankees don't really strike out. They make a lot of contact, so you kind of take that away from Kennedy, some of his strikeouts, and just add more hard-hit fly balls, and it could be a good spot to get, a cheap Yankee stack. The Brewers, I think, are my favorite off-the-board, assuming they're off-the-board, stack against James Shields today. Shields, I looked at Shields' numbers a lot. Shields just doesn't throw strikes anymore. His first pitch strike percentage this year is 40%, which is down from about 50% for his career, I believe. The Brewers, he's down. He's throwing 49.5% first pitch strikes this year, which is down from 60% in his career, and he's throwing 40% of his pitches in the strike zone, which is down from about 46% in his career. So you have a pitcher who's not throwing strikes. He's facing the Brewers, who don't swing. Like, they have the lowest swing percentage of pitches out of the zone and the pitches in the zone. So obviously the lowest swing percentage overall. They have the 6th lowest swinging strike percentage. They also have the 5th lowest contact percentage on pitches in the strike zone. So I think where a lot of their really high strikeout numbers come from are from pitchers that just pound the strike zone because they'll swing and miss and then they're behind in the count. Shields doesn't pound the strike zone. So he's going to be nibbling, and you have the Brewers who just aren't going to swing, and then he's going to be behind in the count. The Brewers against right-handed pitching this year, they strike out a lot, but they also have a 173 ISO and a good WOBA at 327. So they can hit right-handed pitching. It's just that they swing and miss a lot. But if they're going to be ahead in the count, they're getting more fastballs, and they're not going to swing and miss as much. On top of that, they're a pretty right-handed heavy lineup, and so far this season against righties, Shields has a 403 WOBA, 542 xFIP, 32% hard hit rate, and almost 41% fly ball rate in Miller Park. Vegas also likes the Brewers. They're projected at about 4.6 runs. So I just assume they're not going to be popular because there's much worse pitchers on the board today. So that's a spot that I just really, really, the more I look at it, just love. And will look to target, especially because you can kind of mix the Brewers and the Orioles, and you'll have an Orioles stack, but it won't be chalky because you'll have the Brewers. So that's probably my favorite spot to target. And then I also really like the Cardinals against Jared Weaver. He's been giving up over 40% hard contact to righties this season, which is up from 33 or 34% last season. He's extreme fly ball pitcher, and the Cardinals just have a lot of guys that can hit for power. So if he's going to be throwing his 82-mile-an-hour fastball over the plate and not locating it well, which leads to the higher hard hit percentage, they could definitely hit a lot of home runs off of him. So that's what I'm thinking today. As always, stop into the Slurve chat, closer to lock once lineups start coming out, and I'll have, better opinions once I have more information based on lineups and stuff like that. So, talk to you all on Slurve later, and good luck today, guys.